another topic in all of this that I want to make sure we draw out is, we've mostly been talking about small numbers of students and research focused classes. And that's largely what I've been teaching a lot of in recent years. But I know you have experience, even just last semester, of trying to take some of these same kinds of approaches to teaching, to a larger classroom, to a classroom, a class, still on our books, called The Old South, one that we schedule with a lecture model in mind that could reach 45 students. I think it was probably a little smaller than that, but I'm just curious, like, how do you maintain the same kind of commitment to effective historical praxis? And I think I didn't say my vowels very clearly. I meant to say affective, and I think I came out sort of effective, but in many ways it seems like it's both, right?
Well,
But how do
hopefully.
you, hopefully, right? How do you maintain your commitment to affective historical praxis in a class that's larger and where students maybe aren't coming in with the expectation of having to work that hard, right? And having to
Yeah,
be active learners instead
right.
of passive learners. Tell
Yeah,
me, tell me how it went.
yeah. So it went. I didn't know it was the first time I was teaching the class, right? So, and I'm very much I'm okay as a lecturer, but I wanted to give them a chance to actually do history, right, and to apply things, like I do in any setting, and so. I made sure that all my classes, I lectured, but I also had components where they critically engaged with specific sets of sources. And in the class that I had set aside to talk about the importance of trying to understand poor whites. I I had them read a book that I think is it's a fun book, called The Confessions of Edward Isham. And it contains like his confessions on his, right before he was killed for murdering somebody, which is this incredible story of this guy who is just constantly getting into trouble and fights and having sex with tons of different women. And I mean, it's a great read, like to make sure that your students actually read the thing.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? And so you can't believe this guy. And he's always getting bailed out by the women in his life. And it's a fantastic story. Um, so one of the things I wanted to get across to the students comes across in many of the interpretive essays that are associated with in this book. And one of them is by Victoria Bynum, and there's several other excellent essays that talk about either the law and how it worked in that kind of society, et cetera. And so I wanted them to complicate their idea of, one, the unified South, but two, the idea of race in the South, because Edward Isham, he, like many men in his social class, was, shacking up with black women at different times in his life. And I mean, he had a really complicated story, right? And sometimes he was friends with black people, sometimes he wasn't. He got in fights with whites and blacks alike. And the other thing I really also wanted to show is that people were not necessarily bound to a single place. And so this is an age of great diversity, an age of great expansion in the country. And so I wanted to show that fluidity that's going on in that
Mhm.
society. And so it seemed to me that by incorporating a digital mapping assignment that allowed the students to take one page from his confessions and work in small groups to create a digital map showing where he went. Because this guy, he was in Georgia, he went to Arkansas, he went to Kentucky, he's all over the place. He ends up running afoul of the law in North Carolina, and I mean he's all over the place. And so one of the students who works with me, she's a doctoral student. Her name's Chris Noe. She's a digital pedagogy expert, and she wants to focus on that in her doctoral studies. So I said, why don't we come up with an assignment together that would allow the students to do this work? And we did, and she presented it. The students did it in class. It was a big hit. And I've already seen my evaluations that they provided. They said they really enjoyed working on this kind of thing. And what it really emphasized was um, just how much students want to be involved in the creation of historical projects, and that the digital, we always think of it as being this way to like do innovative, new, really fancy research, right? In terms of understanding, um, you know, what kinds of words are being used at given times, and whatever. Like it's got all these great things, but it also allows us the flexibility to provide new platforms for students to try out these research tools, and they can see how Edward Isham moves across the space of what we call the Old South. And I'm going to share a screen of what one of those kind of things looks like. So this is what it could look like, including his specific movement within North Carolina. And in order to find these points, Chris showed them that they have to sometimes engage with newspapers to have a better sense of some of these specific sites. Sometimes they had to find different ways, like what happens when a place doesn't exist. Well, they found, in this one case, she found that the story comes from a brewery, and it's like the brewery was in the place, this Hickstown, which no longer exists, but the brewery's website remembered it. And so she was able to kind of put things together and show the distance between this Hickstown and this other site, um, the Villas Rica. You can see here. And so it just provides different ways of looking at things. And then finally, one last little screenshot is you can see here that these are the women who were in Edward Isham's life. And on the actual map itself, the points like explode and give you some different information. And whenever he was around these sites, and whenever he got in trouble in one place, he would run to another place where the women kind of took him in and took care of him. And Victoria Bynum kind of shows that really well in her essay. So ultimately, this allowed them to really think about history in a very different kind of way.
And then meanwhile, they not only have to read, they have to read closely, and they have to dig, and they have to, and then meanwhile, I guess the other thing is that I think for a lot of people, the digital tools seem, a little scary or something, but I have really valued being here at Mason, first of all, because there's people who know how to use them, who can teach me, but also because that community here just helps me get over that little that threshold of fear, and realize that a lot of these tools are not that hard to use, and that they come with tutorials, and that you can get some at least basic functionality out of digital tools with just a little bit of effort of learning the platforms. So I've used StoryMap, for example, which is a little different, I think, from what you were using there, but it makes it possible for students and myself to create outputs that are just of a different kind, using, again, some of the traditional methods, the reading, the digging, the writing, but in a new sort of audiovisual way that's also shareable. I think another thing is, when I have done digital projects in class, my students love being able to show people what they've done,
Yeah.
show, and I always put it in terms of, showing your employer or putting it, wherever, but to show mom and dad, what you're working on in class is a nice, nice side benefit that
Yeah.
students really get excited about.